Hey, guys, it's Vicky. And today on our agenda is the video Zumers versus Skufs. Sounds like a battle of two eras, right? If for some reason you don't know who Skufs are, let me give you a definition. Skufs are people who are 35 to 40 years old, or rather, over 40. These people seem like they've already said goodbye to life. They don't take care of themselves. They're usually bitter, withdrawn, and act online as if everyone always owes them something. And in real life, they're usually some balding guys who don't watch their weight or diet, and who feel like they've already figured everything out in life. They don't try anything new anymore, they just comment and behave aggressively and rudely. So, today we're watching a video about this confrontation and, as always, we're breaking it down, laughing, discussing, and sharing our thoughts. Alright, let's go.
Why are Zumers actually so weak?
Greetings, comrades. For the first year now, battles have been raging on various fronts. Twitter, TikTok, and Odnoklassniki. The offensive is happening on all fronts, but today the Skufs have broken through the defensive line. So I want to ask, I don't get it, why hasn't the Marshal been poured a victory drink yet? Marshal Zhukov. Anyway, the Skuf army has seriously ramped up its firepower on the internet, because the newsfeed is constantly filled with posts like, Generation Z doesn't know how to do laundry. Zoomers can't wash dishes. Zoomers have come up with a new trend. And it's like this every day, with stuff even we Zoomers aren't aware of ourselves. So it turns out someone is waging guerrilla warfare on the internet. And the comments under these posts are like, Zoomers are just another cult. The sooner they get banned, the better. My son will never become a Zoomer. On Clippy, they seriously think Zoomers are some kind of gang you have to join. Honestly, I get where this is coming from. It's the TV.
Right from the very start, it's like we've landed on the front lines, like a war report. The Skufs are advancing, the Zoomers are retreating. I like how it sounds like a battle between two universes, the TikTok universe and the Facebook universe, or maybe the Odnoklassniki universe. But do Zoomers themselves even know they're Zoomers? I actually only learned about this term very recently. Before, there was just a simple division, young people and adults. Now there are all these detailed generational splits. Every generation has its own name, and every day someone is attacking someone else in the comments. It feels like the Skufs have a special Operation Dangry comment.
Well, we're not saying that an entire generation automatically becomes dumb. Of course it's stupid. Chevy.
Will you be? Yes, said the representative of the generation that charged water listening to Kashbarovsky ate roof tar.
What does tar taste like? I like.
It's delicious. It's funny. The presenter spent 30 minutes talking about how stupid young people are. Then he comes up with this.
For example, it annoys me that I can't, use delivery services.
And a guy who couldn't figure out Yandex food somehow has an authoritative opinion on erasing an entire generation. It's like losing a chess game to a toaster. For many years, the main threat on the internet was mean school kids. But now we've encountered a new Avengers-level threat, boomers or Generation X.
Team X.
People who, if you ask me, aren't much different from the crazies on Twitter. Let me explain what I mean. Because on one side, some are trying to ban conventionally attractive women in games, and on our side of the barricade, it's bans on Shreks, Harry Potters, and anime figurines. Apparently, TikToks are stopping young people from reproducing. Basically, they're just as crazy as the Twitter crowd.
Of course, there's already a contrast. Back in the 90s, some people were charging water through the TV. Now others are charging vibes on TikTok. When you watch adults start talking about how dumb Zoomers are, and then a second later they say, by the way, I couldn't figure out how to use a food delivery app. But honestly, it's like someone complaining they can't turn on a light bulb, but then giving their opinion on the future of global energy. I've always wondered why there's always someone banning something for someone else. One day anime is bad, then Shrek is bad, then Harry Potter is bad. Suddenly, everything becomes dangerous. It feels like adults are just afraid of anything that doesn't fit into their worldview. And you're standing in the middle of all this, you're 24, and you're not really a Zoomer anymore, but you're not an old-timer either. Guys, where's my home?
And maybe you think there aren't many people like that. My dear friends, have a seat. I ventured into those corners of the internet and come back to tell you about it. For a warm-up, let's take a blogger like Vinokurov. I talked about him in the video about the Time of Troubles, where he was drifting through it.
I just found out that apparently, The Zoomer generation isn't having sex. I watched an interview with a Zoomer, you know, kind of an ambassador for Zoomers. You all probably know him, the one with the curly hair. And he says, why even bother doing it that often? Do people really need to do it several times a week?
Some random guy from TikTok said that Zoomers don't have sex anymore. Well, that's absolutely true. And the idea that Zoomers have an official representative, well, I guess there must have been some kind of election. He probably vaped HDQ better than anyone else.
20 years old. Well, back in my day, any normal guy would think about nothing else day and night. Day and night, day and night, day and night. I go into the comments under that interview and read stuff like, you're supposed to do it every week, and even several times a week. Why? There are so many other interesting things to do. All Zoomers are like this. This need is just a fact. It's trash. 200 comments.
Fact. Comments on TikTok are facts. Well, we're Zoomers, we don't even know who your kex is, and honestly, he should just die. Like, some people just don't like doing that kind of thing. So what's next? What's the point? Vinokurov didn't argue with him at all. He just added, this generation...
We are children of the 21st century.
Is this the most hopeless generation by a huge margin in all of history?
It starts with TikTok and ends with blaming an entire generation for supposedly dying out. I don't get why it triggers some people so much that others just don't want to, die. Let's put it this way, to be sexually active every week. They just don't want to do it, so they don't have to. What? Should they be paying taxes for that or something? This whole idea that someone with curly hair has become the official spokesperson for Zoomers is just cringe. Imagine if he runs for some kind of election and says, hello, I'm a candidate for the Zoomers. My TikTok has 3 million likes. Who even thinks like that? And every time someone says, this is the worst generation, I honestly suffer inside. Because if every generation calls the next one the worst, then the problem isn't with the generations. The problem is with people. And it's a constant problem. Every new generation always hates and looks down on the previous one. But it's always been like that.
Even though the Zoomer is kind of cringe, his idea is actually pretty reasonable. Back then, there was no internet, so the main entertainment was getting drunk on ethyl potion. Now the pace of life has changed, and a lot of people would rather not chase after some dumpling with demands like, I want a boyfriend who's 3 meters tall and earns money with me. Of course, for many, it's just easier to play Dota or CS. If your whole life revolves only around that, well, that doesn't mean you're some cool, tough guy. Go see a doctor.
They don't even have the concept of attracting the opposite sex. Now I get why Zoomers jump out the window when their parents take away their smartphones or vapes. For them, that's their whole life. They don't have anything else. Just scrolling through their feed on the phone, that's it.
Said by a representative of the generation that, statistically, commits the most seppuku and has prostatitis. For those who don't know, that's something that happens to people who don't have sex. Am I wrong? So where am I wrong?
The level of craziness in this generation is off the charts. Every time I think it can't get any worse, they manage to hit a new low. Alright, they don't even like drinking. I laughed about that too. Okay, whatever. But not even wanting girls. That's just insane.
But what if someone chooses to play Dota? Maybe they're just at that stage in life. Maybe right now, they're at a point where playing games is more important to them than dating a girl? Why does everything have to be like it was in your time? Every generation has its own memes, its own jokes. And people jumping out of windows because their smartphone was taken away, that's just going too far. And secondly, maybe it's not about the smartphone at all? Maybe it's all because parents don't give their kids support, don't give them a sense of security, don't communicate with their children. Don't forget, there are also plenty of Zoomers who take part in Olympiads, do well in school, and even start startups and businesses while they're still teenagers. But for some reason, nobody talks about them.
I'm really worried about the younger generation, both Zoomers and Alphas. This is a generation that doesn't have sex, doesn't drink, doesn't get into fights. It's not even a generation. It's more like a lavender raft with coconut milk.
Just don't tell him that they aren't shooting up junk in their veins yet, you know, like real men. But the Vinokurov generation has its own sins too. Instead of beating clothes on a rock, they came up with some washing machine. Not authentic. And the Shrek from AliExpress believes any unflattering nonsense. Constantly reposts videos where teenagers can't use ancient faucets. This generation is doomed. But we'll get back to Vinokurov later. He'll be the highlight of today's video because while digging through VIKKIE clips, I kept coming across these kinds of videos, and Vinokurov reposted them too.
They showed old cassettes to Zoomers, and they had no idea what to do with them. Some put the cassette up to their ear, another one looks through the little holes.
Things got really tricky when a Zoomer was asked to put the cassette into an old player.
If the younger generation doesn't understand things from the past, for some reason that's proof of Zoomer degeneration. But when the older generation can't figure out WhatsApp, well, that's different.
If teenagers don't act like action heroes from the 90s, does that really make them worse? On the contrary, it sounds like a generation that thinks more about themselves, that doesn't want to ruin their lives right from the start. Some people don't know how to use cassettes, and others don't know how to use messengers. That's not degeneration, it's just different experience. But a Zoomer will figure out a laptop or a tablet in 3 seconds. They're just different generations, that's all.
And honestly, I'm sure the author of this video, when he first saw cassettes, either tried to chew on them or just wound them up for no reason. I mean, cassettes are a technology that was already on its way out about 20 years before these mini-humans were even born. But if the videos themselves are pure gold, then the comments are diamonds. This is the end of civilization. We are the last intelligent generation, the only ones left with any brains. TikTok has destroyed everything. Oh, Zoomers. Yeah, there are a lot of cringy Zoomers on the internet, but as someone who's fought in the trenches of TikTok, I can confidently say, there are idiots in every age group. For example, among flat earthers and fortune tellers, it's only boomers. I'm honestly baffled. How is it that for decades, TV has been demonizing young people by those who couldn't even figure out WhatsApp? And I'm convinced if someone lost to Yandex Eats, they're out of their mind.
Every generation says, we are the last intelligent generation. That already sounds like a meme from the start. It reminds me of when Grandma used to say, you know, that everything was better before, the ice cream tasted better, the grass was greener, the sky was bluer. In reality, it's just that technology changes, and those who can't keep up start getting angry. And about cassettes, I didn't get how they worked or how to put them in the first time either. But I'm not yelling about it, saying that all of humanity is doomed. A new generation isn't worse. A new generation is just completely different. And honestly, people act foolish everywhere and always, at any age. I have a friend who doesn't really know how to use an ATM properly. Does that make her a bad person? No, she's just the way she is.
So, someone once called out Vinokurov, hey, how can you trash an entire generation when back in your day it was the same thing with subcultures? To which he responded with a post justifying Gopniks and Outcast. Back then, even if there were emos, people would hunt them down, go after the weirdos, and didn't even consider them human. As usual, Zoomers are talking nonsense to justify their own shortcomings. People like that didn't survive. And anyway, those emos were insanely rare, you'd only find them in Moscow. In all my life in Chelyabinsk, I never saw them. Not even on social media did I come across emos. But now, there's so many of these kids, you just go outside and every other one is like that. Losers. Sheesh. This guy's head is so messed up, he thinks everyone looks like they do on TikTok. Go outside. There's always been some kind of chaos going on among teenagers. Back in the 80s, people would literally duel over blue jeans just to look like American cowboys. And then there are his constant pleas like, bring back the Gopniks. How do you explain the 90s to Zoomers? PFF, you're the guy who was 4 years old in the 90s, telling stories about how you survived gang fights. Well, from what I remember, guys like that used to get smacked with corn at the market. And if you never saw any emo kids, well, I don't know, you must have just stayed home. Even I, who spawned in the early 2000s, caught them just like a bunch of my friends from Chelyabinsk.
Have you noticed that everyone who criticizes young people always forgets that there was a lot of weird stuff back in the day too? I also used to listen to heavy music. Wore black, had long bangs, I was a completely different person. And back then, people like Vinokurov would say we were a depressive, weird generation. Now those same people say that Zoomers look ridiculous. It's just that back then there were emos and goths. Now it's all changed to TikTokers. All this criticism isn't really about the generation, it's about a way to feel more grown up, to feel smarter, to feel like you're right. If you didn't see anything unusual as a kid, it just means you weren't looking out the window or you didn't go outside.
You need to grasp the scale of the tragedy. I'm gonna read his post and you try to visualize it. A lot of people tell me I'm too hard on young people, that there aren't actually that many of these weirdos, and that most guys are like yesterday's instant noodles and girls are just like that. You probably pictured some outcasts or freaks in the photo. But here's the photo. Just regular folks. And, well, it amuses me how some guys still think that long hair on men is something feminine. But masculinity isn't defined by hair length. It all depends on society. For your average Viking, long hair was a sign of toughness. Some places it's a beard, Somewhere else it's a shaved head. But nowhere is a barcode the standard. And when a potbelly guy on the verge of a heart attack begs to bring back the Gopniks and says that in his youth, you wouldn't make it past a single bus stop with that kind of haircut. And let me remind you, this dude once ate poop on camera. Yes, if there were times when his panties would get wet, then when he went outside, a semblance of a bat signal would light up in the sky, so that punks from all over the city would come running to you.
A classic of the genre. There used to be men, but now there are no men, only women in trousers. And most often, it's said by those who, since their youth, listened to all sorts of, I don't know, chanson, country music, drank beer on a bench. I honestly don't remember when long hair became a sign of femininity. Seriously, there used to be Vikings, there used to be rockers. Yeah, rockers have always been seen as something masculine, manly. There used to be hippies, and everyone had long hair, and no one ever really confused them with girls. Now, if a guy's hair is longer than 3 centimeters, they immediately write him off as some kind of sissy, as effeminate. But that's just absurd. And by the way, if you're such a fan of the good old days, when, for example, thugs would beat you up for your hairstyle or for wearing the wrong clothes, maybe we shouldn't be bringing those times back? The very last thing we absolutely need is patrols walking the streets, actively hassling innocent people over their clothes, or even violently beating people up simply because of what they are wearing. Those are times no one wants to go back to.
And then there are his daily posts like, Zoomers aren't interested in studying or working. Zoomers don't want to live. Well, who does? I mean, not about life, but about studying or working. Obvious clickbait headlines. But our Papa Carlo even records an address to the Zoomers. And overall, what's the problem with all these dead inside types? Yeah, they're kind of freaky loners who won't hurt anyone, but that's way better than thugs asking about prison rules or whatever. But let's move on to his craziness. Modern kids are against button phones. Their brains don't even think about pressing buttons. Well, the kid is 3 years old, he's never dealt with that. It's like if someone swapped your Windows for Linux, your eyes would go in different directions, and half of the retirees still haven't figured out touchscreen phones. And that says a lot more about the generation than some ancient artifacts.
So here's yet another story where adults are horrified by the youth, and the youth are completely baffled by the adults. And it's the same thing every day. Zoomers don't want to work. Zoomers don't know how to press buttons. Zoomers don't want to live. Because really, who have ever truly, wholeheartedly wanted to just study and work, to spend their whole life on studying and working? People want to live. I definitely want to live. Especially when we're talking about, 5th grade. They're just kids. By the way, that's actually a common thing. Adults forget that they were like that too, that they used to run around the yard shouting, playing soccer. They didn't want to study, they didn't want to work, they wanted to experience life. Honestly, kids don't have some built-in nostalgia for artifacts from the past. You give them a phone, a smartphone, and they use it. You give them a cassette tape. They ask, how does this work? And that makes sense. None of them bursts into a museum shouting, turn on the gramophone right now. I want to listen to records. I've dreamed of this since I was a kid. But that's a utopia. That's impossible.
By the way, a little story from my own life. Not so long ago, I returned to my hometown and ended up at a gathering with some grandmas and aunts. As usual, I listened to a 2-hour podcast about how foolish young people are. When I was about to leave, the whole group asked me to clean up the photos in their WhatsApp. Maybe I'm not being objective, but honestly, even a monkey could find the gallery icon in 10 years. Yeah, I'm using a specific example, but from what I've seen, for people 45 and older, the internet is like a no-go zone. Although our old-timer here isn't even 35 yet. But he gets it too, and he likes to remind everyone about it. So basically, what I'm saying is that for us, the internet is something we get, but for people over 50, it's a place full of magic. Even though this guy's a millennial, he's kind of weird. Let me take a post where a guy says he really gets the internet. Video transitions at the Victory Parade are the top news on TikTok right now. Gen Zers, though, didn't get that these transitions aren't actual footage, but artificial intelligence. But the millennial didn't get the CGI, called it AI, and blamed imaginary Gen Zers for not getting it. Imagine how the guy who spent a week editing this must feel. And this is just one of 100 cases where some goof forgot to pull his pants down before going to the bathroom, made up some Gen Zers who supposedly didn't get it.
This is a typical situation too. First, the older generation spends hours in the kitchen explaining how young people don't understand anything, and then they can't find the settings on their phone or locate a photo they never even took. It's kind of illogical, to put it mildly, illogical. By the way, I've also noticed that for many people over 45, it's genuinely scary to just use technology. For them, all of this is, like magic, like Harry Potter, like some kind of spells. Then some dude shows up, not even 30 yet, but he's already saying, these Zoomers are clueless, they couldn't spot CGI, they couldn't tell it was computer graphics. Meanwhile, he himself just confuses editing with artificial intelligence and says all this with a face like, I know my way around the internet, I get everything. Thanks for the tip.
Actually, Vinokurov here is more of an abstract figure. You could pick any other guy from TikTok. There are a lot of them, but they all have this one little phrase that unites them. Literally, every one of them says it.
The parable of how Zoomers came to be. Hard times create strong people create good times.
Good times make weak people. Weak people create hard times.
And so Zoomers appeared. Oh, sorry, -5.
Well, it makes sense, oof. So you're a moron, a representative of the generation that created these difficult times. Well, the average age of politicians is 50 plus, and millennials mostly hold leadership positions. And Zoomers haven't leveled up for that yet because of their age. I get how you could counter that, but we're talking in the paradigm of their own amorphous thinking, where apparently milk sours all over the world because of Zoomers.
That really is annoying, though. The favorite catchphrase of all the boomers, strong people and hard times. It sounds like it's really deep. But let's think about it. Who actually created those hard times? It definitely wasn't the Zoomers. They haven't even finished school yet. But millennials and the older generation. Yeah, they were already in charge back then. They were the ones sitting in the ministries and everywhere. And you sit there listening. It's all because of the Zoomers, and you think, guys, do you really have amnesia? First you messed everything up, then you're surprised your milk has gone sour, and you say, it's all because of TikTok. But that's just not fair, no.
A while back, there was that situation with the Zoi Wall where Pasha Technic drew graffiti. A real internet uprising of the Skufs started, which many of us didn't even notice, since, thank God, you don't hang out in those corners of the internet. But I was there and came back to tell the tale. In short, this wall divided an entire country into two ideological camps and turned fellow citizens into bitter enemies. And no, I'm not talking about the GDR. Let me read a post by Merazim from his Telegram channel. This isn't a jab at Merazim, the guy is in the past now, but in my opinion, he illustrated this situation really well. Plus, there are things I don't agree with. Zoomers, fans of Pasha Technic, painted over Zoi's graffiti. I'm just speechless. What a degenerate, dumbass generation. I get it, Technic was funny, but damn it, covering up a memorial wall to a great musician with graffiti of a junkie's name. That's just vile. I'd straight up call that vandalism. Like generation, like idols. But you're a Zoomer yourself, part of the same generation. And graffiti of Zoi, that's technically vandalism too. Yeah, obviously Zoi is closer to me, but it's doubtful that Technic's target audience is Zoomers, since he was popular back in the early 2000s, and his fans are rocking either the androgenic alopecia or convertible hairstyle. Not really popular among Zoomers. My point is, it's just not right to call a whole generation degenerate and dumb because of a couple of outcasts, because in the end, guess who painted over it and wrote back Zoi lives? Zoomers. Because if you open any VK post about Zoomers, the comments are honestly scary to read. There are calls for violence against an entire generation. Up to 99% didn't even know about this wall. Plus, it's just a bunch of outcasts hanging out here, puking on the same wall. There were swastikas drawn there, all sorts of things, and the local residents have repeatedly wanted to tear it down.
Everything needs to be cleaned up, demolished, and forgotten.
And against the backdrop of all this cacophony from the not-so-dumb generation, videos like this start popping up. Pasha Technic was written on Zoi's wall. Are foreign intelligence agencies stirring up teenage protests? NATO is writing Pasha Technic on Zoi's wall.
By the way, if you suddenly don't know what Zoi's wall is, let me tell you. There's this legendary wall on Arbat in Moscow. It's an unofficial memorial site for the singer Viktor Zoi. People have been painting graffiti there for years, writing phrases, sticking things between the bricks, sometimes playing guitar in their free time, leaving messages. Basically, it's a wall of pain, a wall of freedom, romance, and a wall of youthful maximalism. It's kind of a people's monument, meaning no one officially protects it, but touching it is, like insulting an entire generation that grew up on Viktor Zoi's music. And when someone comes there and writes something, for many people it's outright sacrilege, like their sacred place has been violated, their sanctuary destroyed. But at the same time, excuse me, the graffiti itself is already an act of vandalism. And there has always been graffiti drawn there. That's the double standard. But for those who aren't from Moscow, especially, yes, for those who grew up on Victor Tsoi's music, it's really a cult place, especially for nostalgic boomers.
I'll say it again, I'm not trying to say that Zoomers are so smart.
Of course not.
I'm a Zoomer myself, half my brain is TikTok, the other half is video games. I'm not adapted to real life at all. When I see a nail, I just fall on it. Basically, every generation has, and will have its share of idiots. It's an obvious thought, but the guy who goes on about fighting with gangsters every day, going to shootouts, saying Zoomers can't understand, but actually only spent a couple of nanoseconds in the 90s. Let me take another post from Vinokurov. So, someone made a design for Lays using AI, and it ended up with an extra finger. I'll read out some points. So, a generation that can decide in 4 seconds whether they like something or not is presenting a new Lay's chips bag with a guy who has 5 identical fingers. Basically, here's a short answer to the question. Why do we need brains, the ability to think, to delve into things, to reflect? Not like fucking ADHD kids. Glanced at it for 2 seconds and ran off. And of course, Vazia. By the way, here are some actual facts for the first time. What makes you think it was the Zoomers who did this? It's pretty obvious that a 45-year-old dude was hired to make the design using AI. Well, obviously, that's sarcasm. I realize my comments are unnecessary here, because this post deserves to hang in the Louvre right next to the Mona Lisa.
Oh, that's so relatable. I really like that the person isn't pretending to be some kind of guru, but instead honestly admits, yeah, I'm a Zoomer. Yeah, half of what I know is from TikTok, the other half from games. It's a kind of self-irony that's actually disarming. And these stories about extra fingers on a bag of Lays, come on, seriously, who said Zoomers made that? Maybe it was some old boomer designer messing around with neural networks and then didn't check. But the post itself, yeah, that's a masterpiece. I'd also like to sit a little next to the Mona Lisa. Let people at the Louvre have a little laugh.
And this nutcase will definitely watch this video, so let me clarify. Since Vasily is an economist and sells his courses on how to save $1 million with a $50,000 salary, let me explain how to make $500,000 in 2 months. Sure, we believe you. The guy keeps saying he's a dollar millionaire.
I built my capital to over $1 million, and now I think it's already 2 million.
But at the same time, he sells courses for 500 rubles on how to become just like him. No, I admit the guy probably has money, but in response to his take about chips, supposedly blaming Zoomers for it, it's just basic cost cutting. And the problem here isn't with Zoomers. Any entrepreneur tries to cut costs. Otherwise, they're a bad entrepreneur. Honestly, how does this even work in his head? So, he walks into a store, sees the chip packaging design, drops to his knees and goes, Zoomers, why? And really, what is there to talk about if he regularly comes out with stuff like this?
If I see that a Zoomer works at some company, I never go back to that company again. Especially if, God forbid, that Zoomer is the one fixing something.
Maybe I'm about to traumatize him so badly that he'll lock himself up at home and never come out again. But Zoomers are among us on this planet. Maybe even in the same room as you. Don't look around. I'm seriously suggesting that Vinokurov should have a psychologist paid for. Like, get in touch with me, you've got me as a friend, we're connected. I'll pay for a course where they treat people who eat their own poop. I feel like the guy bought Lays at his village kiosk, where the saleswoman probably fries those chips in her basement with her butt, and then he blamed the Zoomers for it. Even if that's the official logo, my take doesn't change. I physically can't break down his daily hate for the younger generation. Otherwise, the video would end up being like 8 hours long. And honestly, there are a lot of guys like Vinokurov out there. I'm just picking him specifically because at least he doesn't really threaten violence. But I'll be breaking down more posts like this and more of these guys on my Telegram channel. Seriously, check it out, otherwise I'll just have to put up with it. It's important to understand that you could easily make a video like this about cringe Gen Z kids too. The whole point of this video is that times change, but fools stay the same. Because as a TikTok veterinarian, I can say from personal experience that obviously there are a lot of cringe kids among teenagers just like in any era, but what's way scarier is that among the elderly there are tons of fortune tellers, flat earthers, and all sorts of other weirdos. So everything's fine with Gen Z. I'm sure things will get better. If there had been phones with cameras and the internet back in the 90s, the word everyone would be using wouldn't be Zoomer. And honestly, putting timestamps on an entire generation doesn't really make sense to me, because one Zoomer might be 15, while another is already 28 and his knees are cracking. And the whole topic of parents and children is as old as the world itself. But now it's much more striking because times are changing so fast, progress is happening, and the older generation just can't keep up with the pace of life.
So, we've all watched it to the end. Honestly, at first I thought it would just be a battle between old boomers and Zoomers, just memes and jokes. In the end, it turned out to be something much more substantial. And on the one hand, sure, it's funny how people argue about cassettes and chips, but on the other hand, it's honestly a bit sad that we, as adults, are so afraid of change that we start fighting with those who just live differently, who were simply born in another time. I'm really curious, why is there so much aggression towards young people? I think it's either envy, or fear, or maybe just the desire to feel smarter, more experienced. Let me know. Seriously, I'm really interested. Overall, the author of this video does a great job of keeping things balanced. It was both funny and, at times, surprisingly deep, without any unnecessary moralizing. Although some of the jokes, some of the humor here, I probably could have done without, but that's just the author's style. Let's not try to change the author's style. The author has the right to their own style. If you enjoyed watching this video, then subscribe to my channel. Be sure to like it if you enjoyed it, if it made you smile, or if it made you think. Thanks to the author of this video. And to my subscribers, I'll just say one thing, you are the best. This was Vicky with you. Bye! Bye! TA. GL. GL.
Jet. Jet. Jet.